Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. And this is Jealousy and Human Behavior, Conclusion, by Manly P. Hall. An article taken from Horizon, the Magazine of Useful and Intelligent Living, Volume 17, Number 4, Spring 1957. Jealousy and Human Behavior, Conclusion, by Manly P. Hall. The Buddhists believe that some basic human emotions cannot be corrected in the present life of the individual. He may have to go out of this life jealous and envious. He may be like one individual I knew whose last thought, as he went out of this life, was that he was glad that his relatives would have to pay for the funeral. The bitterness and antagonism never lessened for a moment. In fact, near the end, it became more aggressive. Those who gathered around shook their heads sadly because they felt almost certain that their relation would spend a long time in purgatory getting over some of these unpleasant attitudes. Actually, this individual is going to spend a long time in the universe learning how to live. Buddha considered it essential for the individual to have several hundred incarnations in this world to clear up these little peculiarities of disposition. Whether or not we wish to regard this as the answer, it is a very reasonable answer, for there seems no good reason for leaving this world until we have learned whatever it has to teach us. The average person, when he reaches the end of life, not only has not learned all the lessons, but has had barely time enough to get the list of questions straight that he is supposed to study. Nature, however, in its quiet way, will keep on. Jealousy, envy, selfishness, and all such emotions will continue to reap their harvest of discord. He will suffer from them continuously and relentlessly until he changes, whether it takes 6 weeks or 6 millennia or 6 million years. He will have to face the fact that nature will never permit the unnatural to survive. All those who've taken various excessive attitudes in history, the Borgias, the Medicis, the Attilas, the Caesars, the Alexanders, the Genghis Khans, must go on until they reach the exhaustion of their ambitions, jealousies, pride, and their instincts to advance themselves at the expense of the common good. There's no compromise in the universe. To grasp this thought clearly may be considered a form of enlightenment. It enables the person to realize that the only thing that can change him is his own desire to change. Until that desire is there, he will go on doing approximately what he is doing, being confronted continually by situations which will stimulate his instincts to negative emotional excess. Year after year, life after life, if necessary, he will suffer the pangs of jealousy and envy. He will be hypercritical, without peace or security, and generally miserable. He will also be physically sick, for as long as he is sick inwardly, this will be manifested outwardly. The pressures which first attack his emotions and his thoughts will ultimately assail the fabric of his body, which then becomes a psychosomatic symbol of the pressures of his own internal consciousness. He will go along nursing his miseries, blaming the universe, shaking his fist at heaven until gradually he exhausts his own endurance. Finally, there must come the time when he looks facts in the face and, perhaps with a somewhat sickly grin, says, "It isn't worth it." That is a stupendous discovery, and whenever it is made, no matter how long it takes, it is worth the price. If the majority of human beings seemingly must proceed by trial and error, living in error and a trial to themselves and other sight is nevertheless not necessary that this should be the pattern. In every generation, there are a few who have seen the light and have realized that they might as well begin to be happy now. They see that between themselves and peace of mind is nothing but themselves, and that it might be a good plan to get out of their own way. This revelation has led to tremendous renovation of character, for the individual begins to think of life not as a time to waste, but as a span properly set aside for self-improvement. This self-improvement, however, is not necessarily a period of constant, monotonous grubbing into ancient knowledge. It is not a miserable routine, but a magnificent adventure in becoming. Once the person begins to be interested in growing, he finds it the most delightful, enthralling adventure that it is possible for the human being to experience. The only difficulty that may arise lies in its effect upon the standard of values. Because we are all extremists, we are likely, when we do sense the possibility of growth, to take an unbalanced attitude in this direction also. Growth becomes the only possible consideration, and so we dive into the sea of the unknown, and instead of growing, we become further confused in strange and conflicting ideologies and doctrines. We must realize that in the beginning there may be certain conflicts, and these must be met according to the resources we have. The purpose of growth in man, like in plants, does not proceed from seed to fruit in a single magnificent jump. Thus, to grow moderately is to grow securely and surely. To force growth is to enter into a dangerous relationship with the natural processes of life as these operate in the phenomenon of growth. If therefore it becomes apparent to us that we are not getting along well with ourselves and with others, then it is our duty to the divine life within us to make a reasonable estimation of the problem. We must be willing to acknowledge the facts if we have permitted negative attitudes to become habitual. If we have a habit of criticism or envy, then we have gradually built upon these habits a destructive philosophy of life. We may even have come so far that we have justified and made virtues of these vices, considering them an essential part of success. By such attitudes, we tie ourselves into a small package, so to speak, bound round by the concept that whatever we want, we should have, regardless of the quality of our desire. This concept that we are here merely to do as we please must be changed, because there can be no progress in human society, no hope for world peace, no end to economic uncertainty, while each individual does as he pleases without any basic concept of what is right. The world is then in a common confusion and discord, perpetually on the brink of war. If selfishness, jealousy, envy, and greed are the deadly enemies of world peace, why do we not instinctively make the effort to change ourselves? Why do we not accept the fact that we are here in this world only a comparatively short time, and that very few matters pertaining to this world are of sufficient basic importance to justify the individual's compromising his eternal life for temporal advantages of one kind or another? Actually, the indulgence of acquisitiveness, envy, jealousy, worry, and fear does not give the individual even immediate security. The more he has, the more he wants. The moment he secures anything, he loses interest in it and dashes headlong after that which is not yet attained. Out of this intemperance from within his own nature, no temperance can come. Since it is obviously impossible that any ultimate values can arise from these constant patterns, why do we maintain them so stubbornly? The answer probably lies in the simple fact that we consider them as part of us. And it has never occurred to us that it is either necessary or right for us to withstand anything in the form of an internal instinct. We feel that we can overcome anything that comes from the outside, but we have no defense against the pressures from within ourselves. Once jealousy has corrupted the heart and mind, we are already its servant, and therefore do not have the values necessary for resistance. We simply give in as the only possible course of action. The pressures of emotion and mind come from the subjective levels of man's nature. These psychological levels involve two factors which are worth considering. The first is that at the basis of the human psyche there is the presence of a universal power, a God principle, a spiritual potency which is inevitable and eternal, and it is this potency which makes life possible. Without this potency, man could not be a living thing knowing good and evil. The second factor involved in man's subjective psyche consists of the vast accumulation of pressures and psychic tension. These are partly derived from outward experience, partly from environmental pressures, and partly from the chemistry of the imperfect function of man's own nature. These various pressures, together with the life energy itself, the libido or activating agent, are combined and intermingled in the subconscious to form what we might call a witch's brew. Out of this cauldron of man's subjective seethings come these drives and pressures which seem so inevitable and so irresistible that we simply accept them. But if it is true that man can be so conditioned that his attitudes, through habitual repetition, become a part of his own psychic nature, causing scars, complexes, and fixations which are kinds of tumors upon the soul, then it is also true that he can change them. This can be accomplished by one of two procedures, either by rapid and very intensive action, or by a more gradual and consistent action over a longer period of time. In the case of rapid and intensive change, we usually find faith forming a powerful cleansing agent, and the instinctive will and desire to believe taking power over doubt and fear. Thus, we have examples of very important psychic changes produced by tremendous religious exhilaration, as in the case of the Shrine of Lords. Here, by a mystical experience of consciousness, the individual can suddenly and dynamically change his entire internal life. Such occurrences, however, are rare, because few persons have sufficient constructive intensity of faith to provide the substance for what appears to be a miracle. The other path is more gradual. The individual, recognizing that negative forces are not principles, but the absence of principles, can gradually begin to pour into his subconscious internal life a more constructive experience pattern. Let us take, for example, the person who says that all the world is against him, and who is peculiarly and completely envious of the success and good fortune of others. Through a change of basic philosophy of life, this person can teach himself to look for good and to become as keenly aware of the wonderful and beautiful things in life around him as he has formerly been aware of the negative and destructive things. Once he can see good where previously he saw only evil, he begins to realize that it is quite possible to gain great satisfaction and enjoyment from simply sharing the happiness of friends, or being glad for them that some hope has come true in their lives. Every time that anyone in the world is happy, our potential of happiness is increased, because actually we are all mysteriously bound together by a spiritual identity. The good that comes to another also touches us and becomes the basis of greater and deeper hope within ourselves. By degrees, then, we can begin to rejoice in the evidences of the fulfillment of law. We can begin to see how these persons may have earned what they have and that they are receiving certain rewards. If they misuse, we must realize that they in turn will lose. And if their gains are ill-gotten, they will be taken from them. And we will be sorry, not glad at the prospect, realizing that it is part of law and that these people do not know this law and are therefore going to be hurt. Yet we also know that in the long run, this hurt, as in our own case, is the source of salvation. By thus learning to appreciate the workings of the laws of life, we can gradually transmute the instinct to jealousy. We can realize how important it is to release those for whom we have great affection. If we love deeply and truly, we desire the greater good for the object of our love, and jealousy never carries this thought. Sometimes we try to justify jealousy by taking the stand that we know what is best, but this is usually only a veil over our real intent, which is to hold and to make complete our possession of the object of our affection. Under these conditions, we lose the spontaneity of affection and the whole beauty of love. For the only affection which is real is that which is bestowed without duty and without eternal reminders. If we must demand love, then it is not real or natural, and perhaps it is withheld only because we do demand. The pleasure of giving is spoiled if we know that the recipient demands the gift. When we give according to expectation or exchange gifts according to values, we lose a great deal. The same is true of friendship, love, honor, or cooperation. These things are never given cheerfully if they are demanded. Jealousy demands, and it accepts lip service or eye service, but little by little, resentment rises in the object of such possessiveness, until finally the relationship is broken completely. A simple proof that jealousy is wrong, therefore, is that it never improves a relationship, but always destroys it. There are many persons who will say that their jealousies are well-founded. If they are well-founded, however, they are really not jealousies at all. They are facts. As such, they are beyond that condition in which internal emotional unrest should be devoted to them. If friends are unfaithful, or those who are bound to us by various ties of affection are themselves guilty of breaking those ties, then we must ultimately face another fact, namely, that it is extremely foolish to attempt to demand that which is not given freely and generously. Under such conditions, it is better to recognize the situation and clear it completely on a factual level, than to continue all kinds of secret conspiracies and subterfuges in an attempt to perpetuate a relationship that no longer exists. Assuming, however, that most jealousies are excessive and usually start with imaginary or comparatively trivial matters, then recovery on the part of the jealous person is the first step in clearing the situation. If the jealousy continues to embitter and disrupt the relationship, it will ultimately result in separation. Therefore, suspicion, fear, doubt, envy should be repolarized as far as humanly possible in the experience of the person. The energy used for fear can become faith. The energy used in jealousy, which is the desire to possess, can be transmuted into a simple recognition of the magnificence, beauty, and wisdom of release. Actually, that which we release seldom departs from us, and that which we try desperately to hold is forever seeking to break away. Thus, if instead of trying to hold the individual, we transfer our feelings to the other person in the simple statement of what is good and best for him, we save both his good and our own. Jealousy and envy are not possible between friends, and where these attitudes are permitted to intervene, the friendship itself is inadequate and immature. Certainly, jealousy cannot exist where love is real, because love is completely concerned with the happiness, security, and well-being of its object. If then we relax on some of these problems and begin to consider what constitutes a mature human attitude, we will gain a great deal. On the level of envy, a mature attitude is that we hope the best for all. This sounds like heroism, and we will probably not succeed all the time in maintaining such an attitude, but it is still the mature attitude. It is also important to learn from what happens to others, to try to discover how we can constructively earn the right to have those things which others enjoy. We must always remember, however, that true happiness comes not from having more, but from needing less. If we begin to think these things through, we are growing up. We do not expect these attitudes in adolescence, but after a person has faced 20 or 30 years of adult life and has seen the facts, we may reasonably expect a more mature outlook. At the same time, we must not be disappointed if our expectations are not justified. We have only one natural right, and that is to expect more from ourselves as the result of this kind of observation. If we would begin to rejoice at the good that comes to others, we probably could work out a formula for world peace. We would also be able to get over the endless religious wrangling that has divided the population of the earth into rival camps since the dawn of time. The mature attitude on all human emotions and relations is that we want the happiness of the other person. We want it sufficiently that we are willing to sacrifice our own for it. When we begin to think that way about our friends, husbands, wives, and children, there will be a very marked change in the state of the American home. Yet this is not a heroic attitude. It is not something that belongs in the millennium or the golden age. It is simply the attitude of the mature human being. If we do not have this attitude, it is because we are resisting the normal tendency to growth. We are not virtuous because we grow. We are vice-ridden because we do not grow. There is no great reward that should come to us. Nor should we have halos and jewels in our crown because we treat other people decently. The natural jewels which result from right attitudes are happiness and peace. And when we love persons enough to give them the freedom to be themselves, then they do not make us unhappy when they are themselves. And unfortunately, they are going to be themselves whether they make us happy or not, and we might as well face this inevitable fact. The individual will discover that as a result of constructive attitudes, he will become the object of those affections which he most desires. In the involved lives of human beings, it is observable that persons who take the correct attitude have the natural reward of that attitude. They are not neglected or forgotten because they supply a powerful inducement to others to respond in like measure. When a person is intelligently kind, understanding, and fair about a situation, we are likely to meet him halfway. If a person trusts us, we have an instinct to be trustworthy. If we do not have that instinct, we will probably become aware of our deficiency and perhaps even resolve to make whatever changes are necessary in ourselves. Individuals who have taken the attitude of love through release have never been alone. And those who have tried desperately to hold love through jealousy are alone. It simply does not work. We would think that in the course of ages, human beings would wake up to this important fact because they have all seen it operate. Yet each expects a miracle, believing that he is different from all others and can succeed where others have failed. There is absolutely no ground for this, but it is still a common illusion. If we sincerely want to solve the problem of jealousy, we have many incentives. There is not only the unselfish and impersonal incentive that overcoming immature emotions is right according to divine and human law, but also that it is the way of contentment and peace for mankind. It is the way of health and security, and the one great and eternal method of making friends and influencing people. It is what we are supposed to do, and the rewards on the individual and collective levels are incredibly great. Understanding this, we will perhaps develop another incentive, one which actually must come before we can make a dynamic change in ourselves. This is the realization that it would be worth it to take a different attitude. The moment this fact sinks into consciousness and joins the prevailing confusion there, it begins to order that confusion. The next instinct or impulse to a negative expression will then be less intense, and with it will come more constructive implications. Gradually, we build positive patterns of plan and purpose into our inner psychic life. As we begin to develop constructive attitudes, they will flow out into objectivity when we need them, and we will have strength instead of constant pressure coming from within. With this inner strength, moving out because of conviction and energized by vitalities on the level of high purpose, we will change. And we will become the people that we ought to be. We will begin to fulfill the promise of long ago that there can be peace on earth and goodwill toward men. These qualities must take the place of man's great pressures and express themselves in his daily conduct. In his present course, man is throwing away happiness, even while he is seeking it. But if he will change his pattern, he can attain happiness even while he is learning to live. For learning is not necessarily painful. It is painful only when we resist instruction. If we accept this challenge to growth, we will discover that by degrees, jealousy and envy will lose their importance, and that in their place we will have a kindly, sympathetic, gentle understanding of the strength and weakness of human nature. We will not expect too much, we will not be disappointed, but we will quietly and naturally give an example which will stimulate others around us to self-improvement and thus help to bring about better families, better friendships, and a better world. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.